That's every day at the White House.
Tell us some stories.
I can't tell you stories.
Well,
but
there's some stories you can
but
tell.
It's the Trump White House is nimble. That's dynamic. Those are the nice ways of saying it changes every day. And
the biggest, this is not what I was briefed for moment.
I did not go into the White House in 2016. The 2020 election, I ran Florida. And then when he came back to Florida after leaving the White House, he called me and invited me to dinner, which I was not in the inner circle. I was just overwhelmed. I couldn't imagine why. I drove down to Mar-a-Lago, which I think he thought I live, 10 minutes from there, but it's really 4 hours. And we had a lovely dinner, and at the end of it, he wanted to know why he won Florida, but maybe struggled in some other states that I think we're going to find out he actually did win. But I'm a member of Congress, and I've kind of been in that pathway ever since. And in recent years, the biggest risk I took was, I think in 2016, I had a couple of Floridians in the presidential race who I really adored, one of whom is the Secretary of State now. And yet I wanted a disruptor. And I looked around at the disruptors in the field and said, I think Donald Trump's the one. We were the 17th string. We were the last people chosen, the last people with experience. And yet here we are. So that was a big risk that certainly changed everything for me and made life completely different and better than I ever could have imagined.
What did you see that made you think that a disruptor was what was needed?
I'm a lifelong Republican. I'd always been sort of a traditional Republican, and it just wasn't working in my mind. So I thought we got to do it differently, but it has to be a Republican. There was a huge field, for those of you that remember that race. It was quite contentious, but literally, I looked around and said, which one do I think can win and is legitimately a disruptor? And I think we all agree that President Trump was that person.
I think they need you in the Senate.
Yeah.
We here at Independent Women are huge Susie Wiles fans.
Thank you.
And we're so grateful that you've accepted this honor. Part of the reason that we think you're so amazing is that it's never about you.
No.
It's all about getting things done and being impactful and keeping things quiet while layers of smart strategy get a chance to unfold. There's tremendous discipline and focus that's required for that. And it's so rare. I mean, we're in Washington, where the oxygen of the place is self-aggrandizement. Why is it that you don't need the external validation that so many need, that you see in politics? And do you think that perhaps being a woman helps in that regard?
Well, first of all, thanks to all that took the time to be here. I'm very honored. I looked at the list of who'd been honored before me and thought, oh boy, I don't deserve this rarefied air. And then I got here and saw a tactical team with the Secretary of War. So we should all feel very safe.
I have never felt so safe.
It's not about me. I mean, that's why it's easy to have it not about me. I'm not on the ballot. I just have a team, and the team is incredible. Many of them have been with me and with President Trump for years. And so it is easy to not be personal about it because it just doesn't require that. And yes, probably is easier because I'm a woman, but honestly, just look at the facts. If you make it about you, you're taking away from what the cause is really about. So I don't find it hard.
Well, we appreciate it, and I believe that is truly the smart strategy. When you look back at your early career, did you ever imagine that you might end up in this kind of a role, shaping the future of our country, or did that path reveal itself over time, or did you only find out, like yesterday, in 2024?
I didn't. I was going to be an English teacher, and just happenstance led me to an early political job, and then I've been in and out of the field for some years. But this is the path God chose for me, and I'm here, and I'm doing the best I can every day. And that's what my recommendation is to everybody. Show up, do your best, work hard, have a great team around you, and success will follow.
Was there a defining moment that led you to think that this might be where you wanted to be and what you wanted to be doing?
You mean White House Chief of Staff?
Or that in the whole political space?
No, I worked as an intern on the Hill, a paid intern when I was young, because I could make more money there than waiting tables. I mean, honestly.
And what about for White House Chief of Staff? When did that call to you?
I thought about it sort of the last week of the campaign, whether I would want to stay in Washington, whether I would go back to Florida, and didn't really think deeply about it. And then a couple of days after the campaign was over, the president called me in and said, "I hear you don't want to be my chief of staff." I said, "Well, where'd you hear that?" So here I am.
Was there a risk you took that, in hindsight, really shaped the trajectory of your career?
Early on, I took a number of years off work at all, and certainly this business. And when I went back to work after my children went to school, my first job was working for a good friend of mine, because she was a good friend of mine, but she was also a member of Congress. And I've kind of been in that pathway ever since. And in recent years, the biggest risk I took was, I think in 2016, I had a couple of Floridians in the presidential race who I really adored, one of whom is the Secretary of State now. And yet I wanted a disruptor. And I looked around at the disruptors in the field and said, I think Donald Trump's the one. We were the 17th string. We were the last people chosen, the last people with experience. And yet, here we are. So that was a big risk that certainly changed everything for me and made life completely different and better than I ever could have imagined.
What did you see that made you think that a disruptor was what was needed?
I'm a lifelong Republican. I've always been sort of a traditional Republican, and it just wasn't working in my mind. So I thought we got to do it differently, but it has to be a Republican. There was a huge field, for those of you that remember that race. It was quite contentious. But literally, I looked around and said, which one do I think can win and is legitimately a disruptor? And I think we all agree that President Trump was that person.
I think they need you in the Senate.
Yeah.
So you've been in this game a long time, and part of that world is navigating relationships with an often hostile media. Mm-hmm. The president and his team regularly are attacked by the media, and you came in yourself for a pretty nasty attack last year. So as you've found yourself targeted, has that experience given you a different understanding of how to navigate, and you yourself, but also conservatives generally, should navigate those relationships?
It was really, back in my career, back in the day, I did press work. That was my job. I was a press secretary and a communications director. And at the local and state level, I think you have good relationships most often with the press that cover you. So I was a little bit surprised at the intensity of the vitriol, not only for me, but for many members of the cabinet, even our staff. So I think you have to grow thick skin, which is not easy, and I can't say I've succeeded there. I resist the temptation to correct everything that's wrong, because you'd spend all your day and night doing that. And I stay off Twitter because that makes me crazy when I see all that criticism. But honestly, you just have to get up every day and do your job again and not let the critics get to you. Easier said than done, but that is my way of operating.
So are you still, one assumes, back channeling with media, or are you now much more careful about who you talk to? And
much more careful, and if I do it, I get in trouble at the White House. So because I do it at 1:00 in the morning, and so I don't. I have a couple of friends in the reporter ranks, but we keep it to friendship. I don't. I leave it to the others.
Okay. So we should assume that if there is a quiet conversation with the media, it's something that the president wants put out there.
Yeah.
Just J.D. Vance told a story about sort of market testing an idea deliberately that way. Have there been many of those?
Not too many. Not for me.
Okay.
I know they go on, though.
So this is a more, I've thought about what it must be like to work in that White House. maybe you're one of those lucky people who only needs 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night.
No.
But if not, or even if you do, how do you manage working for somebody who never sleeps and in a White House that operates on Trump time? How do all the normal mortals who need to function manage that?
I am not one of those people that doesn't need sleep. I actually do very much. But in the campaign, when I go to sleep early, and Dan Scavino, who I'm sure many of you know, is a night owl, so we divide it. And I get the early calls and Dan gets the late calls. And that's the way we've sort of navigated over a couple of years, making sure we all get enough sleep, even if the president doesn't.
Okay. Is there a misperception you often wish that people understood better about the White House and how it functions and the president?
Oh, yes. Yes. We work hard. Many people make sacrifices. They have young families. They have marriages that they're trying to keep intact. And there's just not the ability to prioritize that. So when people come to work at the White House, they're giving up a lot. So when we hear how what rarefied air we live in, that's true. But it doesn't come without a price. And we're honored to pay it. But I wish people understood more what 7 days and 14 days and 21 days of 18-hour work days do to you. It takes a bit away. And so we're not spoiled. We work in a beautiful, beautiful place for a wonderful person, but we work as hard as anybody I've ever known, and certainly as hard as I've ever worked.
Can you share a moment that didn't go as planned and what leadership looked like in that moment?
That's every day at the White House.
Tell us some stories.
I can't tell you stories.
Well,
but
there's some stories you can
but
tell.
It's the Trump White House is nimble. That's dynamic. Those are the nice ways of saying it changes every day. And so you just really, I had a head start because I went to work almost full time for the president in 2021. So I've been watching this movie a while. And you just have to roll with it. You never know what he comes downstairs with in the morning, but whatever it is, you have to move it forward and deal with it. So life is not, the surprises are not surprised. They are what they are every day.
Okay. The kind of work you do requires intensity, resilience, and long stretches of pressure, just by definition. What helps you stay grounded in the midst of it all?
Well, when you introduced yourself and talked about yourself, you talked about your children, one of whom I understand works with us. Is that right? One of your children works with us?
She may even be here. I don't know if Kevin Hassett let her go. I see you, Delaney. Yeah, so one is a Marine, one is working in the White House. The third one jokes that the first two are on the public dole, so he has to be in the private sector making money, so he's with a startup in Austin. So
I have 2 daughters, grown daughters, and a grandson. And so I wake up every morning thinking about what I can do just in my little piece of the world to make the world and their lives better going into the future. That is enough to motivate me. Others may need more. I don't. That's all I need.
I appreciate you saying that, but I've got to still think there's something that you may do when you need time to reset and recharge. What would that be? What's the Susie Wiles recharge your batteries strategy?
I love to walk wherever I am. I find a good path and walk. I have a very eclectic music playlist that I listen to that has nothing to do with politics or anything. And I think the most recent song on it is probably from 2000. So.
Having worked so closely with President Trump, what's something he insisted on during a campaign that made you think, that's very on brand, but I did not see that coming?
Well, it's no secret in this room, and I see Todd Blanche here, we had a few trials and a little courtroom time. And in one particular trial, at the end of the day, he walked out to talk to the press and just sort of held court out in this nasty, dirty courthouse in Lower Manhattan, right? Yeah. And I thought, why are you doing this? And yet, so on brand. Of course he did that at the end of the day for like weeks running. And there are so many examples of that where he doesn't do what you think he's going to do, but it is so him and it works so well.
When he decided to serve McDonald's or drive a garbage truck, was that his idea?
No. I spoke earlier of a great team, and that was their idea. The McDonald's, I mean, that just sells itself. He eats it every single day. And the garbage truck, I see Brett Powell here. I think she had something to do with the garbage truck.
Okay. When you first started working with President Trump, what was the biggest, this is not what I was briefed for moment?
I did not go into the White House in 2016. The 2020 election, I ran Florida. And then when he came back to Florida after leaving the White House, he called me and invited me to dinner, which I was not in the inner circle. I was just overwhelmed. I couldn't imagine why. I drove down to Mar-a-Lago, which I think he thought I live, 10 minutes from there, but it's really 4 hours. And we had a lovely dinner, and at the end of it, he wanted to know why he won Florida, but maybe struggled in some other states that I think we're going to find out he actually did win. But I wrote like an after-action report, gave it to him to read, and as I was going out the door, he said, I have a PAC, and I think it has money in it, but I'm not sure, and I'm not sure who works there. Can you take that over? And I said, well, sir, I have a job. He said, no, you can do it in your free time. You can get it done in a week or so. And I did. So here I am.
Very good. He does get value for money, doesn't he?
He does.
So we have only a few seconds. Do you have time for 2 questions?
Of course.
Okay. As you reflect on your career, what is a lesson that you learned that you wished you had known earlier?
I really have always believed in the concept of a team. I was raised in a family of athletes who understood the value of all of that. I raised my own girls that way. But the full extent of what you can do if you have good people around you, you don't want to get any credit, and you just want to put the best product out that you possibly can, is something I wish I'd known in my 20s. I didn't. Not like I do today. So I think that's what I wish I had known earlier.
And finally, when you think about the legacy of your work, what do you hope people will say about your impact?
I've not thought about that. I'm not leaving anytime soon. Thank you. I guess I want to be known as somebody who was predictable, steady, considerate of everybody, the people that work with me and the people that maybe oppose me or us. And we've moved forward at a pace that's almost inconceivable, and yet we continue to do that. And I'm very proud of our ability to pull everything together to get that done. I hope I'm remembered for that. I also, and I think I can say this, I got a cancer diagnosis 9 weeks ago, and I come to work every day. I do my job. I don't complain, and I think that sets an example too for the people I work with.
Bravo. We give out awards to honor people, but truly I think it is we who are honored by your accepting this award, and I'd like you all to join me in one more round of applause for Susie Wiles.
Thank you so much.
Our woman of valor.